Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the murder of one Robert Beckowitz, and now I am saying straight off the bat that this case is highly disturbing. It involves some very depraved things, and yeah, this probably won't be for everyone, and I just figured that I would warn you straight away just in case. It's pretty gory and very grim and very gross, so yeah. This case was suggested by Brittany, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have, and of course if you have any more, please do let me know. I also would quickly like to mention that there were photos taken during this case. They are very easy to find if you just type the name in Google, the victim's name. So yeah, maybe don't do that if you don't want to see things like that. Obviously I'm not going to put them in here. I will describe them a little bit and go into a little bit of detail. I warn you before I do that, so if you wish you can skip that part. Let's just get into the case. Robert Beckowitz was born on the 5th of October in 1948. Unfortunately, I literally couldn't even find a picture of him. I couldn't find anything about his life, really, who he was as a person, which is really frustrating. I tried really hard to find it, but sadly the only information that I could find was about the case, really. It wasn't about him as a person. I did read that Robert was referred to as Bobby, and I also know that he was dating a woman called Janine Lynn Clark, who was 21 years old, and she was often referred to as Charlie. He lived in a basement apartment on Woodbine Street in the northwest of Detroit. I guess that leaves us with just the option of jumping straight into that fateful day. It was the 14th of July in 1982. Robert was sat chilling in his apartment and he was watching some telly. He was sat on the sofa next to Janine, his girlfriend, and one of his best friends was also there. He was called James Edward Glover and he was 37 years old. People sometimes refer to him as Jimmy, as they often do with the name James. So they're all chilling, they're all just hanging out watching telly, and they're actually specifically watching the Benny Hill TV show. They're all sat there together, just it's just a normal day, as it always is. I keep saying that in all these cases, but that's how it starts out to be. The one thing that Robert did not know, though, was that his girlfriend Janine was actually cheating on him with his best friend James. Right, so they were having an affair. He didn't have a clue, I assume, anyway. And they were doing it in secret. They decided that they wanted to carry on this affair, but they no longer wanted Robert to be in the picture. Now, normally, you just, I don't want to be with you anymore. I'm leaving. I'm being with James now. Yes, it would crush him, but that's what the normal thing to do. You just dump them. But no, that's not what James wanted to do. He wanted to get rid of Robert, and by get rid of, I mean murder Robert. And James didn't go into this without actually thinking about it. He did think about it because he was classed as handicapped. He had this spinal cord injury, which forced him to walk with a cane. So he struggled to walk a little bit. And Robert was a decently sized guy from the pictures. So I assume that James thought he probably couldn't take him on. He's got his handicap. And then Robert, if they was like having a fight or something, James will probably lose, let's face it. So he thought about it. He excuses himself from watching the TV show. He goes down and he goes and grabs a handgun from Robert's apparent, like he had a decent amount of guns apparently in the apartment, like quite a lot of them. So he goes and grabs one of Robert's guns and he starts walking back to the living room. It was a .45 caliber handgun that he returns with, and Robert's just there watching telly, and then he goes up to him, points it at his head, and he shoots, killing him instantly. Now, he did also end up stabbing Robert 83 times, which is a lot of times. I don't know whether he did that straight after the bullet or whether that was just done over the course of the whole horrific ordeal that they were going to carry out, which we'll get into, unfortunately. But they had like this 3-day sex mutilation ritual with Robert's dead body. It was drug fueled, and yeah, it's very disturbing. They had like a sick sexual fantasy I mean, you're going to see this face a lot because why? I don't know why anyone would want that, but they did, and they actually carried it out. So once James had killed Robert, they then proceeded to take copious amounts of drugs, mainly methamphetamine, which drug that's often used with like really, really gruesome cases. What are really like graphic and disturbing. So I don't know what the heck that drug does to you, but it's nothing good. The more drugs they took, the higher and higher they got, and the worse and worse everything that they did got. This was when the pair both stripped down naked. They take Robert's body. They pull his trousers down sort of just past his genital area. And, well, you can probably guess what they do next. Janine goes and gets a knife that I believe she bought earlier. And she proceeds to cut off his penis. Just a bit of a warning here. I will describe some graphic sections of the first photo they took. Or what? Well, I don't know whether it was the first photo they took, but... Well, yeah, it must have been the first. One of the first ones, yeah. Okay, one of the first photos they took. So she's there, naked, hacking away at it, which is bad enough. But then James pulls out a camera because, I don't know, they want to remember this moment by. It just, words aren't enough to even describe this. But he pulls out a camera and then they take a picture. Like, she poses for a picture. Well, she doesn't pose initially, but she does pose for pictures. So that picture shows Janine sat on the sofa naked with a blank expression on her face. She has the knife to where his penis would have been. Like I said, that wasn't the only photo they took. They took many photos. I believe, I'm not sure whether it was one reel full of photos or two, because I've read both, I think. But either way, they took a lot of photos. And all of those photos have never been released. So there are 12 available online. And again, I mentioned them in the beginning. I warn you, they are so disturbing. And for people who are very affected by things like that, I don't know, it's hard to explain. They could scar you. They very well could. So I would advise you, if you have like a curiosity about it and things like that don't really affect you, then okay, yes, maybe look it up if you really, really want to. But other than that, I wouldn't if I was you. Because they're very upsetting, they're very disturbing, and unless you're prepared to see something like that, you know, it could really affect you. So, just clearing that up right now. Don't go in it blind. Prepare yourself if it's something you really want to look up. Because they really are just something else. It's thought that the other photos will never ever see the light of day. They probably involve necrophilia, which obviously is very illegal. I mean, killing people is very illegal. Everything that they did was very illegal. But it's, I don't know. I can't even imagine what those photos are like if having seen the ones that they did release. I wouldn't even like to think what the others contain, because they were never released to the public and probably never will be. They carried on mutilating his body. They took pieces off of his body. Well, they dismembered his body too, and they took those pieces and they would pose in horrific photos. They would pose as they were carrying out like the mutilations. They would pose in degrading and vile ways. Obviously, I'm not going to put those images in. Again, it's your choice if you want to look them up. But I can go into some detail on like how they dismembered him and what those pictures actually contain. So if you're curious about what they might contain but don't want to look them up, then I will give you like a brief sort of description of them. And with that description, obviously, will come some pretty grim things. So again, if you wanna skip this part entirely and just skip ahead, then please do so. The hacksaw that they used to dismember Robert's body was apparently borrowed from James's own mother. In one of the photos, you see James sat on the floor next to Robert's body that is just fully covered in blood at that point. He has a massive grin on his face, and you just may think that, you know, he's just sat next to the corpse and that's that. But when you actually look closer, that is not that, because he has hold of Robert's penis and he's actually shoving it in Robert's face. Another photo shows Janine smiling and posing as she tries to, well, before she actually attempts to decapitate Robert, because she's got the hacksaw like at his neck. And she's smiling, and it is so crazy. Another shows Janine looking down as she tries really hard to basically decapitate Robert. Obviously, it's not an easy thing to do. So, yeah, they took turns at the decapitation because he found it really difficult to actually carry that out with a hacksaw, as you can imagine. There's also photos of James attempting it too, like, you know, really concentrating. They're not posing at that point, they're just really concentrating. The next one shows Robert's body in pieces. It's very disturbing. He no longer has a head, he doesn't have any legs, and there's like this cut on his arm. That's probably where they were obviously trying to remove that one next. I believe it's his left arm. This is where it gets worse, and you may be thinking that that really isn't possible, but trust me, it really is possible. They take his decapitated head and they place it on a chair. They take a photo of that. They then take his hand, which his dismembered hand. They take a photo of that on the chair. They put his dismembered foot on the chair and take a photo of that with his big toe shoved into his mouth. I don't know. I honestly don't know. And then, on the picture with the hand, they also take his penis, put it in his hand, and put that sort of towards his mouth area, I guess. Why? I can't answer that question. I'm sure neither can you guys. There's also another photo where his finger has been shoved up his nose. Again, why? These are honestly the photos that they've released. One can only imagine what the others are like. One of the last photos that was taken, I know that all of this is really disturbing. I'm not trying to say that it's not, because it really is. But to me, I just found it really, really eerie and creepy how they posed it, because the last photo is of Robert's dismembered feet and they put it on a stool. So as you can imagine, somebody putting their feet up to watch telly, I guess that's what Robert used to do. I don't actually know, but this is what people assume because of how they posed the feet. So they take the dismembered feet, they put it on the stool like as if he was still alive. As how he would have put his feet on that stool if he was watching telly, alive. So I just found that really, really, really creepy. It was just really hard hitting for me, considering what it represented and just how depraved and, I don't know, they were just degrading him in so many ways, and just the symbolization of that, I don't know, it just hit me really, really hard, and I just found it really haunting. By the time that they were done over the 3 days, Robert's arms, legs, head were all dismembered. He was actually cut up into 14 pieces, and they were taking photos again whilst they were doing all that. They were also having sex on top of his body. Why? I don't know why anyone would want that ever, but yeah, that's what they did, so there you go. I also did read somewhere that I don't know whether someone's seen these photos. Obviously the police saw them at one point, whether it ever got out what these other photos were, but I read speculation, I guess that's all I can call it because it's not confirmed, that these other photos that weren't released contained James mounting Robert's dismembered torso and them using Robert's body parts in the acts that they were carrying out with themselves, each other, I guess. I don't know. Again, I cannot confirm that to be actually true, but it's not something I would really put past them at this point. Once everything was all over, they had finished with everything that they were doing, they took those 14 pieces of Robert and they put them in plastic bags and they hid them around the apartment. This is when Janine claimed that after the drugs had all worn off and she was coming down, that she realised what they had done, and this is when she called the police to tell them that James Glover had murdered her boyfriend, Robert. She also said that she was an unwilling participant in the dark, twisted act. Basically, James had forced her to do it. I don't really understand that, because in the photos you can clearly see that she is smiling away. She's literally partaking in it all, and she doesn't look like distraught. She's actually smiling. So no matter how high you was, would you really partake in sexual acts, dismemberment, body mutilation with a smile on your face? I really don't think that you would. If you were doing that unwillingly, at least. It's a question. Definite question. Anyway, initially the police did actually believe her. Like, she told them that James had killed Robert, which technically he did. He was the one that shot her. Him, sorry. But yeah, they didn't think she had anything to do with it, pretty much, that possibly she was an unwilling participant. And James actually said that, you know, he said that he forced her to do it. So the story checks out, right? But they go to the house, they find James, pretty sure that he was very sedated, probably still under the massive influence of drugs. He was in the garage, and obviously they look around, they find the bags with Robert's body parts in. They also found a reel of film, which was, what's the word? Unprocessed? Not processed? Undeveloped. Is undeveloped, I think. It wasn't developed yet. I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm using it anyway, okay? Obviously, they arrested James. They charged him with second-degree murder, using a firearm during a felony, along with mutilating a corpse. He pleaded not guilty by means of mental incompetence, but a psychiatric evaluation that was carried out on him, well, they disagreed. He was deemed fit to stand trial for the full charges. Janine was actually arrested, but not in relation to, like I said, she wasn't believed to be partaking it willingly initially, so she wasn't actually arrested in regards to that. She was actually arrested for a parole violation for her previously assisting in a bank robbery. That is why she ended up getting arrested. And this is when, about the time that the film was finally developed. And you can imagine the shock, horror, absolute just sheer, I don't even know the words for it, and what the police found on that film. Can you imagine being the first people to actually witness those atrocities? It probably would have been a massive shock. Like, there's a lot of cases where people dismember the body and try and get rid of the parts so that they can hide the crime easier, but not a lot of them take photographic evidence of them performing and posing the body and things like that in such grim and gruesome ways. I know there are cases out there. This was the 80s as well, so those police were probably, I mean, nobody's probably ever expected something like that, are they? Let's face it. It probably scared a few people, to say the least. So they're looking through these photos, and they come across the one where Janine is happily smiling away with the hacksaw in her hand, you know, before she attempts to dismember Robert's head. Decapitate Robert's head. And I have seen that people have commented saying that the smile looks forced, but I'm sorry. If I was being forced, say at gunpoint, to chop up somebody's body after they had just been murdered, my face would be devastated. I would be crying. I would be absolutely disgusted. I would not be sat there smiling away. Even if he said smile, you would be able to tell on someone's face that they were absolutely repulsed and distraught and upset by what they were doing, even if they were forcing a smile. But at least in my opinion, yeah, I don't see any of that on her face. I just see her smiling. And not only that, were the police now looking at her thinking she wasn't an unwilling participant, witnesses came forward to say that she had left the house with James on numerous occasions, but not only that, she left the house alone. At least twice. They saw her out there without him. If she was so frightened and whatnot, you'd think that she would have legged it and ran away, but she didn't. She came back. Witnesses also heard her on one occasion, after getting locked out of the apartment, screaming to James to let her back in, and that was about 2 a.m. in the morning. So she was actually begging for him to let her back in. That, to me, doesn't seem like a person that is unwillingly doing this. So obviously, with all of that, it all flipped on her. They've got the photo evidence, they've got witnesses coming forward to say all of that, and, you know, they decided that they were gonna try and press charges against her. They were gonna try and get her for desecration of a dead body, using obviously the witnesses, the photos, as their evidence. Not only that, they also used the fact that James was handicapped, like he had to use his walking aid. So surely a healthy young woman could have gotten away from him. She had ample opportunities to get away from him when he was not there. He wouldn't have been able to get her back. Yeah, okay, you're scared, feared for your life, all these things. But if you have an opportunity to escape, you take that opportunity. And with him being handicapped, it was assumed that she probably would have been able to get away from him even if she wasn't left alone. But she was, and she still went back. Which, I don't know. But her defense team stuck to their guns. They stuck to the fact that James had forced her to do everything. He forced her to stay. He forced her to pose for those photographs so that he could use them to later blackmail her. Janine gave her version of events of what happened that night. She's on the sofa with Robert. She's holding hands with him. James comes in, shoots him in the head. She don't have a clue about any of it. She said that he told her not to move, not to make any noise, that she forced him, obviously he forced her to do everything. And then he told her to hide out in her apartment or something like that as he got rid of the body. She was supposed to stay there for a few days. And she didn't argue because she was just terrified of him. She was scared that he would kill her, which is what he said he would do. She did admit that James did allow her to leave twice during the incident and that she returned both of those times. And the reason that she left was to go and get more film for James's camera. James testified that he killed Robert and he must have been responsible for the mutilations and the photographs, but he said that he couldn't be sure because he was heavily drugged on amphetamines, and said that the whole 3 nights were just one big puzzle that he could not explain. You and me both. This all led to his guilty plea coming out on the 30th of November in 1982. And James Glover was sentenced to 30 to 50 years for the second-degree murder of Robert Beckowitz, 2 years for possession of a firearm during commission of a felony, and 6 to 10 years for the mutilation of a human body. The judge did recommend that he not be considered for parole until at least the minimum sentence that he was given was carried out. Janine Clark was found guilty by a jury on the 2nd of February in 1982. She was actually sentenced on the 23rd of February and she was given 6 to 10 years for mutilation of a corpse. I have also seen that 10 years is pretty high for the crime that she was convicted for. So if that is the case, you could say that they threw the book at her in that sense because what she did was beyond horrific, but she didn't actually murder him. So that is why the sentences were so different. James got many years because he actually carried out the murder and then the mutilation of the body and things like that, whereas Janine didn't actually murder Robert. People, despite that, still believe that she deserves as much time in jail as him, which I probably would be inclined to agree with, in my opinion. I know it's murder is like carries these huge sentences, but she had to be pretty disturbed to do what she did. I know she was under the influence of drugs, but how many people in the world are under the influence of such drugs and they don't go around cutting people's bodies up? There, I said it. I don't know what to think about this case, to be honest. So anyway, that's the reason she didn't get like a super high sentence like he did, because she wasn't on trial for murder. No matter how depraved it was that she actually did, because boy was it depraved. But yeah, there we go. Something that really frustrated me about this case initially is that I couldn't find anything on who Robert was as a person. But not only that, I also couldn't find anything else on Janine or James. Janine got 6 to 10 years, and that was in the 80s. So you assume that it's very highly likely that she is out now. I also read somewhere that she was released in 1997, but I couldn't find anything else on it whatsoever. Obviously, you're thinking that if she was released, she's probably changed her name and living under, you know, a different alias somewhere else. When I googled her name, it did come up something about tax fraud, but I don't even know whether that's her or not. I just put it in because if you do Google her name, that will come up. But again, I can't confirm that that's actually her. That was in 2018. And again, there's nothing on James either. I did come across something somewhere that said that he died in jail in 1984, but I really don't believe that, because I just feel like if he had actually died in jail a year later, that there would be a news article or something about it somewhere, and I could find nothing. So whether they were just mistaken or they had like some, I don't know, some inside information and it was never publicized, I don't know. But if we disregard that, again, I wanted to put it in because I did find that somewhere, but there's just nothing else. Like, it doesn't go into detail, there's just nothing else, just that. So potentially you could find that out there. Again, personally, I don't believe it to be true. And going off what the judge said, if it wasn't true and he's still alive, still in jail, the earliest that he could be out with what he said about, you know, parole and his minimum sentence would have been 2012 at the age of 67. So does that mean that he was also released in 2012 if he got parole, you know, maybe a couple of years after that, or was he denied parole? Is he still in jail? Is he even still alive at this point? Obviously that was 2012, he would have been 67, so now that was 10 years ago, he'd probably be 77. Who knows? I just couldn't find anything on it, and it's very, very frustrating. So if anybody knows anything, please do let us know in the comments. But yeah, this case is highly disturbing. Those pictures are highly disturbing. I did find it interesting to look into, and I don't know, just the mindsets I just could never ever understand. And I do know it was drug fueled. Obviously that does affect you highly, but surely you'd have to be a pretty disturbed person in the first place to do something like that, even on drugs, or have mental health issues. But mental health issues, James Glover he tried that and he was deemed fit to stand trial, so clearly he didn't have mental health issues. Yeah, it's just my opinion in this. I'd like to know your thoughts on it. The official motive of James Glover murdering Robert Beckowitz has never been made public. We do not know why he did it. I mean, we can only assume that he wanted to kill him to get him out of the way so that he could be with Janine. But the thing that I don't get here is, you know, Janine just told the police. So I don't understand the plan. And again, you could have just left. You didn't have to brutally murder and, you know, dismember his body and do all of that gross stuff. You could have just left. So we will fully never find out the truth behind his motive, I guess, and it will probably remain a mystery forever. But yeah, that's the end of the case. If you guys have enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for similar content. Anyway, that's all I have today on the brutal murder of Robert Beckowitz. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!